Volcano, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about Volcano. So it's a bit more of a short-range composition style map, just because of how much of the fighting revolves around really 2 points of the map, which everyone knows point, which all the fights revolve around point. But a lot of it is like the only relevant off angle is this side, which is an obscenely short sightline angle. So generally, you're going to be running compositions like Reaper, May, Genji, Tracers, Sombra, Sojourn, and things like that can contest this space here or can fight on point. Snipers aren't bad, but they're a little bit limited with how they can play. So you're going to notice that this angle here, the more open angle, is like really, really bad. And so the only sightline that you can actually play is essentially here, which is not bad if you're playing a character like an Ana, Baptiste. I guess a little far for Baptiste, but there can be value found here. But if you're playing like a Widowmaker that you want to change your sightlines or other more sniper-oriented characters, you're going to have a hard time changing your sightlines on the map beyond this situation here. So it's kind of more of a short-range composition-friendly map or dive composition-friendly map. So point is powerful. Obviously, I would not recommend holding on point too much unless you're holding the front corner. It's a little bit too naked. I think a priority for people is to try and get control of this right side, so that if you can have a point, you can also have an off angle from this right side. I think this high ground has really good sight lines here. The challenge, obviously, is this is pretty tight. So jump pad, not particularly useful. We were just talking about this. Not particularly useful. It's something that you can be aware of and utilize, but sadly, there's no door here that goes to anywhere. So the flank angles there are just not super relevant. So backliners, really passive. Zenyatta, Ana, you could do work up here. Other than that, flankers, be aware of this route. It's not particularly useful, but the more important route to be aware of is this route that wraps around this way with a mega health back. And this can not only wrap around to the relevant flank that we talked about, but it can also wrap all the way around to the enemy side and be able to have free access onto the enemy backline. Now, I want you to keep in mind that something we pointed out, there's a real dearth of health packs back here. So it's really just this mega. And there's a mini underneath on both sides here. That's going to be mirrored on the opposite side. But there are not many health packs in this map. So you're going to have a bit of a hard time playing yourself as a flanker if you're not leaning into the right side. Because at least with the right side, you can get supported, right? And you can also have the mega health pack. But there are not many health packs in this area here. So left side, not particularly useful. You can wrap around and access the backline from here. That's fairly good if you're a flanker. And there is a mega health pack here. But you're pretty much limited. There's only really 2 approaches from either side. And there's a lot of these like little hallways that you can utilize like this here that aren't super useful, right? Because the problem is that the sightline of this little hallway doesn't really take you anywhere. You can't really see anything. And even little things like here, like if you're a flanker and you're wrapping around this side, well, it doesn't really get you anywhere. If you're taking the time as Tracer to wrap around to here and then wrap around deeper, at that point in time, you just rather go out the other angle and go a little bit safer, a little bit deeper from this path, even though it takes a little bit longer. So that's mostly it. Tanks generally want to be fighting, I would say either on this corner, like I said, on point, or fighting on this choke here. Not a whole lot more to add. This is probably the most basic of all the Samoa points. How do you feel about holding deeper in that lava room? Like pushing up and holding people here. Yeah, so I think this is definitely something where like holding deeper can definitely be useful. So you'll see people sometimes holding more aggressively here instead of holding on point. So this might work if you are running one of those aforementioned brawl compositions where this choke is pretty nasty. And because you're holding this choke, there's ways of setting up different off angles with more variety than just holding on point. The only thing you got to be aware of is there's always a way of breaking that flank. So if you're being held there, you are vulnerable to this flank here. And actually, in my opinion, more importantly, you're very vulnerable to people wrapping all the way around behind this way. But yeah, there is a time and a place where holding close here is relevant, depending on the composition. If I'm playing tank, how do I convert from holding high ground to contesting point against brawl? For example, I'll be worried about getting rolled. Right, so you might be starting here, like how do I touch point? You touch point at the last possible second, really. You leverage your spam, you let your team poke out just a little bit first. It's always a case with things like this. Like think about like Nepal Village, think about like Lijiang Tower Control Center. You only touch point when you absolutely have to. So you want to leverage your spam, play it slow, and then touch point the last possible second. And then preferably touch point in a location where like you can at least disengage to cover if you need to. Do I like apple juice or orange juice more? Orange juice 100%. Apple juice is for betas. Apple juice is hard beta material. You like apple juice? I'm just not like, I'm not surprised. The shoe ticks, or the shoe fits. Nah, you guys are total L. Bro, apple juice is so beta. Apple juice is so beta that they literally put it in other fruit juices because it's cheap and just like cheap sugar. Literally, seriously, anytime you guys get like one of those crayon apple or like orange mango, blah, just check the ingredients list. Cringe take? Your mother's cringe. Okay, so Samoa Beach. Now, this one is, I think, probably the most beautiful of the points. Maybe the most beautiful Koth point that we have. One of the most beautiful Koth points that we have, certainly. But is, in my opinion, one of the more problematic balance ones, just because there are a couple of points that are really, really awkward to play around. First things first, I'm going to be honest with you guys. This section of the map on my screen is almost entirely fluff. It is generally never good to spawn hold or hold close here. So you're not likely to be spawn held here. And even if you are, there are so many health packs and nooks and crannies and ways of getting around it. There's megas up there. There's flanks underneath. There's even cool things like this little flank here. Bet you guys didn't know about that. That one's all really great and all, but it's just not likely a portion of the map on either side that you're going to be really using much. It is worth noting that this little door frame has a mini and can wrap around on deeper flanks. Like that's kind of useful to know for flankers. And it is worth noting as well that like if you're going for a flank on this side, you can wrap all the way around. Like there's like just a straight lane from really both the far left and the far right, like most Koth points if you want to wrap all the way around behind. But you're just not going to be fighting much on that third of the map. It's really mostly the major, I won't even say the third, but like a good decent chunk of the map in the middle that you're going to be fighting. And this is where there's so much diversity in terms of like levels and layers of like what's good. So we're just going to start just here. We're just going to pick this room because everyone knows that there's going to be fighting, at least starting from this room. So mini health pack here. Obviously, everybody knows that. There's a mini health pack back here. Everybody knows that. But what you might not know is that this here is not somewhere that you want to be pushing out as a unit as much as you possibly can. Maybe on first fight when there's like neutral ground. But I really strongly encourage people whenever you can, especially if you're running characters with mobility, SAMOA Tracer, Genji, even characters like a Casti, Iliari, Kiriko, something along those lines, you need to try to not push all out of this choke at the same time. The Indian team's holding this high ground, and they even have like, let's say an angle over here on this high ground here. This is like kind of a death trap, right? And you've probably had a lot of fights where people like kind of brute force it out here, and it feels terrible. So I recommend taking this left lane here with this mini, and there is a mega in here, and trying to utilize some pressure from here. You can also wrap all the way around behind here. The other alternative, which is a little bit worse for non-flankers, is to take this door out this direction and go through this high ground here. Now, the reason why I don't like this one as much is because the cover here is super, super awkward. And you're going to notice that there isn't like a lot of sustain here. There is this mini here, but it feels a little bit more open. And also your sight lines here aren't all that good. So you kind of have to commit, and committing for some of the slower characters can be hard. I do recommend it's better than 5 stacking and walking out, but just be aware of that. In terms of this building over here, this little tiki building over here, there is actually nothing in here, really. The only relevant thing is the mega back here, but there's really nothing here. You can use this to deepen your flanks and then access the enemy team's high ground, which is fairly useful. But again, a lot of fluff on this map, a lot of beautiful fluff, but fluff nonetheless. So again, you can leverage that. I do recommend being familiar with the underground pathing, which starts from the very far left side. From this perspective, you can go and touch point. You can also wrap around to the opposite side. And the big thing why this is important is it actually allows you to access the mega back here through this staircase here. So you can actually start here and grab the mega and then come up from behind this way. So basically, anytime that you're on the floor, there will be at least one, if not 2 ways, if not even 3 ways for you to be able to reach the high ground or the low ground. There's always going to be some sort of staircase or lever or flank to be able to reach that way. For defenders, I really recommend or neutrals, fighting with backline or squishy characters here, something that has a little bit more poke. You can force short range characters up in here. Flankers, you can wrap around flank the far flanks in either the left or the right. But I recommend like trying to keep your more static characters in this vicinity here, or even back here where they have good sightlines but aren't too close, and they can have an easy LOS on the point. Short range characters, like I said, tanks, all that kind of stuff can hold here. Obviously, if you're playing a Winston, you might not want to stand out in the open here, but yeah, try and do that. Now, one thing I do see occasionally is people overemphasizing point. Now, point is important. You need to cap point to win the game. However, you want to spend as little time on point as you possibly can, similarly to Volcano, because point is very easy to get off-angled. It's like the typical arena thing where the point is very valuable, but is not very valuable space. In other words, to win a fight, standing on point is not going to help you. There's no cover. There is a little bit of cover underneath here, so that's something you can leverage if you're playing like a Tracer or Genji. You can pressure point and then disengage. But for most characters, you do not want to be on point. In fact, going to point too early can give the enemy team the opportunity to get out of the choke, take off angles, take high ground, and then you're kind of screwed. So you want to prioritize the positions around point, but not point itself unless you absolutely have to. That's pretty much all I have here. I think it's important to note, like I said, that there are a lot of flank angles that wrap all the way around, but a lot of those flank angles, the only thing stuff that really matters is what's on my screen right now. A lot of the fluff on the left, a lot of the fluff on the right, not super relevant. There are some megas, like for example, there's a mega up along coast there. Like you probably didn't even know that, and there's ones on the opposing high ground, as well as a mega in spawn. But a lot of these things are just not going to be particularly useful most of the time, unless you're maybe a Sombra living in the backline. So it makes other juices taste better. That's a superiority. Yeah, see, you're just lost. You're a lost cause. There is no saving you at this point. You've been not. What's the opposite of based? You're apple pilled now. It's over. You've taken you're blue pilled, cringed and blue pilled. You're appled and blue pilled right now. Apple juice copium still. No, you're not. No based. The only way that you're based is like you're appealing to the base instincts for sugar, but no flavor. It's terrifying. We put a bag in your face? No, cannot do that. Apple juice can get you get sick or after a glass. Orange juice can never. Having a very strong opinion about orange juice is very cringe. I don't know. Sounds like you guys just can't handle facts. Lemonade is peak though. True, it is good. I think you having a strong opinion about people who have strong opinions about juice is cringe. Milk is superior to all juice. Sounds like a strong opinion. Okay, so let's talk about downtown. Now, downtown, similarly to the previous one, has a lot of fluff. A lot of areas of the map that are not going to be particularly useful. There are buildings in here with minis. This first building has a mini. This building, even all the way over here, is like, oh, look at this. Isn't this nice? But it's just not going to be held most of the time. And there's even this building we discovered, this one right here, which has nothing, right? So there's a lot of portions of this map. There's a mini underneath here. And then I think we already pointed this out. But yeah, we already pointed this out. There's a mini over here. But there's a lot of buildings around here that are particularly fluff just because it's not very good for defenders to fight there. There's no real advantage to fighting there as opposed to fighting on point or fighting the buildings. You might be held here because this is a pretty nice choke point. But again, that's after a big chunk of the map has already been surpassed. If you are being spawn held, always remember that there's always a flank to the left or a flank to the right. Remember, you can even go out the spawn door out in the grass. This looks like you can't go on the grass, but you can literally go on the grass. So you can go out this way as well as on the far right side. So highly recommend not worrying yourself too much about the first third on either side and focusing mostly on the main area. So main area has a couple of things that are to be aware of. Everybody knows the point, but people need to remember that there is cover on point similarly to Oasis City Center. You can contest point from this position. So if you're playing a flanker, you want to be obnoxious, want to back cap a Sombra, there's all sorts of things here. And even as tanks, like if you're pressuring point, you really need to be playing around this structure in the middle because it's the difference between the other 2 points where you actually have cover on the point. So if you're contesting point, if you're fighting on point, the cover here is incredibly important for DPS and tanks that are fighting here. Supports, you can definitely position back here. Everyone's going to be defaulting to that, but it does make you open to flanks. And if you have time to reposition, an angle here sometimes can be quite good. But also, if you have the time to position, there are a lot of good sightlines here for more range characters. The way to get here is to go out this way and to come up these stairs here. So you come up this way, go up the stairs, take a left, and then there you go. You have a nice little sightline on point. Great cover. The only downside of this is obviously there's not a ton of health pack options here. There is a health pack in here somewhere. I will find it. Give me just a moment. But yeah, oh yeah, it's under here. So I guess it's an option technically, but it's a pretty inaccessible option. So that's something to know of. And there is a mega all the way over here. But again, this area is probably not something you're going to be utilizing a whole lot unless you're maybe hard flanking as a tracer, somewhere, and so on. So other side, it's going to be a little bit more hot. This building here does have a mini. This is pretty important. If they're holding close, it's good to know that. People will sometimes contest you in this choke here, but you always have the option to fight in here. Now, there's a mega here. There is an angle on point, a great angle on point that you can take here. Whether you're soldier, damage boosted, Ash, Sojourn, even just a ball setting up for a flank on backline. Really, really, really nice here. Not very small choke, pretty big choke, right? And then the other point as well is this staircase leads to a nice little cozy high ground where you can peek out and shoot on point. Not a lot of characters will be able to utilize this. It would take a character that's either being mercy pocketed, maybe a soldier here, maybe even an Ana in certain circumstances could come up here and have a nice sightline because there is really only one path to you. The only problem in this position is that if you disengage, you do kind of drop into the open. So that's just one thing to be aware of. That's pretty much it on this map. This map is relatively simple. Like I said, so much of the nuance of these SAMOA maps is relatively fluff. I would say that this map is a lot more friendly to the more pokey-oriented characters than some of the other 2 points, just because of the more open space on point and some of the fact that the flanks are a little bit more broad. But for the most part, this point is a relatively balanced brawl, dive, spam. Any of the long-range, short-range mobile characters will do just fine. Is there a health pack near that high perch? This one up here, yes, there's the mega underneath in here, but that is all. And there's also, like I said, the mini on both sides, but that takes a little bit getting to. What is going on in my Twitch chat? Every single time they set the bar low, they rumba right underneath it. It's like playing limbo, kind of far. Lots of downtime to get poked there without support. Then yeah, and it honestly, the sightline isn't all that much better than just taking the angle here anyway. In which case, you're much faster to get to this position. I would agree. I feel like this high perch is very, very niche. The options to rotate from it aren't particularly good. Do you think that there will be a boy born that can swim faster than a shark? Good question. I mean, keep trying, right? You got to stay in your grind set. Surely one day. Sounds like a really great Disney movie. Baby that could outswim a shark. Would you say Diver Brawl is better than SAMOA? Does it depend on the point? Yeah, it depends on the point. I think I would say this one probably favors dive a little bit, just because of the more open space. I would say the previous point is more 50-50 because it is more enclosed, but there's a lot of verticality that dive can play around with, especially around point. And then the first one I would say is because it's more flat, and I would say it's more brawl focused.